Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. Non-violence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him. Martin Luther King. When thinking of Vinland Saga, and Vikings in general, violence is surely one of the first things that comes to your mind. Violence is so deeply entrenched in the culture and history of Vikings that making a show about them absolutely requires you to tackle the topic in some way, shape, or form. And the first season of the shows excels in that very aspect. From its fight choreography to its animation, whether it be a very personal one-on-one duel or a large-scale battle, the violence and the splendid way in which it is presented is what captures your attention. And where Season 1's main appeal certainly was the violence, Episode 1 actually already gave us a glimpse of what the show was really about. Force gave his son the message: a true warrior doesn't need a sword. And while that message flew over his and so many of the viewers' heads, Season 2 really hammered it in. The main character of Vinland Saga, Thorfinn, is someone we as the viewer get to see grow up. From a small, shy boy to a rage-filled teenager out to get revenge, finally blossoming into a true man, looking like the spitting image of his father. The journey he went on is one of many hardships, of pain, of loss, and of grieving, but it is one we could all stand to learn a bit from. Watching his father being murdered right in front of him at the young age of 6, Thorfinn had but one goal in mind: kill the man responsible for the terrible tragedy. Shoving his family, still living in Iceland, to the back of his mind, his head was filled solely with thoughts of revenge. He made it his life's mission, even joining the crew of the man who killed his father, to achieve this goal. So when Canute, Prince of Denmark, kills Askeladd, his target, right in front of his eyes, he snaps. His immediate response: violence. After all, that was the only thing he had known for the past 11 years. Naturally, assaulting a member of the Danish crown would not go without repercussions. However, while an action like this would normally result in a death penalty for the perpetrator, Thorfinn wouldn't suffer that fate. Perhaps as a sign of grace, perhaps as an apology for snatching his life's goal away right in front of his eyes. Whatever the reason may be, Canute let Thorfinn live, albeit as a slave. Thorfinn did not really view this as an act of kindness. At this point, neither slavery nor death really mattered to him. The goal he had worked so hard towards, that he killed so many people for, was gone, and nothing but emptiness was left. He fell into a state of depression, absent-mindedly carrying out his work, more resembling a mindless drone rather than a living, breathing human being. However, small ripples can cause big waves. When the farm Thorfinn worked on acquired a new slave, initially there appeared to be no changes. Thorfinn barely spoke and had no real interest in interacting with anyone else. That slave, however, didn't care about that. He was brash and forward, and slowly but surely he managed to pick away at the shell Thorfinn had receded into. They began to cultivate farms for themselves, and were even given the option to eventually use the hard-earned fruits of the labor to buy back their own freedom. At first, many fans had complaints about the direction the show was taking. They tuned in to see brutal fights. They tuned in to see blood, uncensored and raw violence, and to sneak a peek into what life back then must have been like. They tuned in to see a boy with an unquenchable thirst for revenge do everything in his power to avenge his father. So when new episodes came out on a weekly basis, a vocal subset of the fandom was eagerly awaiting a return to form. They saw the farming part of the show as just a valley they had to get through to get back to the peaks of season 1. The fans who stuck around, however, those who were interested in the show not just for its action, but also its quiet moments, soon discovered that Vinland Saga was different from its contemporaries, that Season 1 was just an appetizer for the main course that the author Mukata Yakimura and Studio Mappa had prepared with Season 2. You see, while Vinland Saga lured you in with promises of breathtaking action set pieces and combat scenes that you wouldn't want to miss, something it certainly delivered on in Season 1, the show was actually a character drama and case study with Thorfinn front and center. Thorfinn had been dragged away from his family and out of his comfort zone at a very young age. Before becoming a slave, he spent more time fighting under Askeladd than he did with his own blood. However, Askeladd, even if you give him the benefit of the doubt, could only serve as a twisted sort of mentor figure to Thorfinn. Thorfinn had no one to call family with him on his travels, certainly no one who would raise him. As such, while growing into a fierce and feared warrior, mentally he remained a lonely, angry, and scared child. That's why the period of time he spent on the farm was so crucial to his growth as a person. Thorfinn had to catch up on years of adolescence, years of growing up. On the farm, he forms genuine human connections for the first time in years. First Einar, then another slave, Arnheid, and eventually even the bodyguard and old master of the farm. And nothing represents this odd way of growing up better than his initial interactions with Einar when they were starting to cultivate their own fields. Considering he grew up in Iceland, it made sense for him not to really know anything about how to grow wheat or anything relating to farming for that matter. But in a larger sense, this was representative of the knowledge he should have been taught throughout his adolescence, but never got the chance to, just like his ability to form genuine connections with other people. Thorfinn finally managed to step out of the shell he cocooned himself in after the death of Askeladd. But while this was a wonderful thing, that step also signified one other thing, a painful reminder of the period of time he had locked away in his memories. For a while, Thorfinn had suffered from nightmares. Nightmares that woke him up from his slumber day after day after day. But he couldn't seem to remember what it was that haunted him so. Maybe as a sort of defense mechanism, or things he already knew but didn't want to realize. However, he couldn't live in this state of ignorance forever. In one of the most hauntingly beautiful scenes of the entire show, it gets revealed just how tumultuous his emotional state really was, and just how much guilt Thorfinn was carrying with him. His nightmares take place in a location that could only be described as his own personal hell. Every night, when he would go to sleep, he would be confronted by all the people he has killed. He doesn't know their names or what they even looked like, but he does know that he is the one responsible for the death of each and every single one of them. Now, the typical response would be to run away, to avert your eyes from the situation, as the guilt would crush anyone who would try to face it head on. And for a long time, that's what Thorfinn did. But it couldn't go on like this. He couldn't keep running from the pain, the sorrow, and the guilt. He had to face the sins of his past and atone for them, else he could not fully experience what the future had in store for him. Vinland Saga tackles this issue with more grace and realism than nearly every other piece of media I've ever consumed. Thorfinn did kill numerous people, and while he wasn't the only one at fault, when all is said and done, he is still the one responsible. Thorfinn reflecting on his actions is absolutely a necessary first step, but it doesn't magically absolve him of his sins. Those were his actions, and nothing he can do will ever change that. But that also doesn't mean he has to live a life of constant regret, as long as he acknowledges the harm he has caused and works hard to avoid repeating his mistakes. In fact, he vows to never pick up a sword again, to make sure he can't inflict that type of pain on people ever again. This brings us back to the words uttered in the beginning of Season 1. A true warrior doesn't need a sword. Thor imparted his son, and by proxy us, with this message. We never get to find out what exactly led him to feel this way, and truthfully, it doesn't really matter. We are shaped by the things we experience, by the actions we take, and each and every person lives a completely unique life. And yet, after what felt like a lifetime of struggle and hardship, Thorfinn arrives at the exact same conclusion as his father did all those years ago. In the years following this revelation, Thorfinn tries his best to become kind and empathetic towards the people around him. He always tries to find a non-violent solution to every problem he and his friends have to face, no matter the difficulty. This, naturally, didn't always work out, and upon the death of Ironhide, he and Einar vowed to journey to a land to the far west, Vinland, to create a society without war and violence. But they were about to face their toughest challenge yet. Canute, lacking funds after his takeover of the Danish throne, was planning on taking farms from their owners to rectify that issue. And Ketil's farm, the farm on which Thorfinn and Einar had spent the past few years, was his first target. All did not seem lost, however, as an old family friend of Thorfinn, Leif, appeared just in the nick of time to free him and his friends from their bonds. But Thorfinn couldn't swallow to leave the farm and the people he had grown so attached to their own fate. And considering his personal connection with Canute, he planned on convincing him to reconsider his attack. Canute's guards, however, wouldn't cooperate that easily. They wouldn't just let him waltz in there and get an audience with the king without an actual reason. He tried to convince them that he was once part of the royal guard and had been an acquaintance of Canute in the past, but to no avail. Rod, one of the guards, tried to remove him by force, but once he failed, he made Thorfinn a proposal. If he could weather 100 hits, he would be granted an audience with the king. Thorfinn would employ techniques to lessen the impact, but that wouldn't entirely remove the pain they caused. Pure willpower and dedication were what actually allowed him to endure the punishment. Left with no other choice but acknowledge Thorfinn's efforts, the guards let him speak to Canute. Bruised and battered, Thorfinn took his stand before the king. Canute, who had expected a violent outbreak from the person he had once caused so much anguish, was surprised when it didn't occur. Thorfinn treated the king with all due respect, even apologizing for the wound he had caused. After all, it wasn't enough to just be a pacifist physically, but also mentally. But the negotiations failed as soon as they had started. Canute simply refused the request to let the farm be, as he absolutely required taking it over for his grand plans. While Einar became furious at this notion, claiming that the king could never understand what it took to raise a field from scratch, Thorfinn's reaction left everyone speechless. If I can't convince you, I will just run away. Instead of clinging to the idealist hope that he would be able to change someone's mind, no matter how convinced the other party was, Thorfinn took a more realistic approach. If there was no way he could change his mind, he would simply take his bearings and leave. He would try to flee as far as he could from the king, as he valued the lives of himself and his comrades over taking a stand for something which would ultimately get him killed. These two interactions, in my opinion, perfectly showcase what it means to be a true warrior. Thorfinn's philosophy of non-violence was absolute, and he showed his utter conviction to that philosophy. There were plenty of opportunities for him to pick up the sword and take the easy way out. During the beatings, he could have simply defeated the guard and prevented himself from having to endure the pain of those 100 hits. But Thorfinn firmly decided against this. there was no point in negotiating for peace by enacting violence. If he wanted to convince Canute, he had to do it by showing him that peacefully solving conflicts was a viable alternative to violence. In his negotiation with Canute, there were several different avenues he could have tried. He could have tried pleading for the safety of the farm, he could have tried to bribe the king, and most easily of all, he could have tried physically defending the farm. But once again, he believed that there was no point in achieving his goal if any blood had to be spilled. Flabbergasted and in disbelief, Canute actually agreed to withdrawing his troops from the farm. Listening to Thorfinn, he had realized something. His and Thorfinn's goals actually somewhat overlapped. In fact, in some strange way, both of their philosophies actually perfectly complemented each other. While Canute strove to create paradise for everyone who fit into the traditional Viking worldview, Thorfinn aimed to create a safe haven for all of those who didn't fit, those who didn't belong. Having felt alone in his plans, Canute felt a sort of kinship with Thorfinn. He sympathizes with his goals and ideals and recognizes Thorfinn as a person who could help him achieve his ultimate goal. So while Canute's actions here look like an unprovoked retreat from the outside, they're more of a change of mind on the part of Canute. But while Thorfinn's plan worked out here, the show also pointed out that his philosophy wasn't flawless, or even necessarily the objectively correct one. While his pacifist methods are the ones that work for him, they certainly won't work for everyone. Not everyone can be convinced with words, and sometimes violence cannot be avoided. And for that exact reason, I am thrilled to experience what paths the story will take in the future. Their quest to create Vinland is of noble nature, but the path they're taking is a thorny one. There will be moments which hard decisions will have to be made, but I will be there to witness what the outcome of their story will be.